was tired of us not being able to eat at the end of the month because we'd run out of food stamps. I was just tired of roaches waking me up in the middle of the night. And lastly, I was tired of my siblings and I living in this tiny little bedroom without any windows. It was always dark. If you want to be very, very successful, right? You need two things.
Let's say you're going up to my door, maybe to kind of sell me, and I want to see how you kind of handle these objections.
And here's the thing, right? If you play it safe all the time, you're technically squeezing God out of the formula.
Hold up. I got to write that one down. Say that again.
I'm curious for you, if you could share a story about maybe one of the obstacles or failures that you dealt with.
I've had quite a bit of those.
Hearing you talk about a nervous, stuttering kid, it's insane that now today you're a 9-figure CEO.
I had to become the head of household at 15 years old. And now, I've been able to build a pretty successful company.
We've got an incredible guest for you guys today. We're out in Calabasas, California at Edwin Arroyave's house. You've got a very fascinating and interesting story that I think a lot of people could hear. Let them know about, kind of the past that you come from. What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the School of Hard Knocks podcast. I'm James, and I'm here with my co-founders, Jack and Josh, and we've got an incredible guest for you guys today. We're out in Calabasas, California at Edwin Arroyave's house. Very happy to be here right now.
Hey, glad to have you guys.
So, Edwin, for the people that don't know...
By the way, does it matter if it's Calabasas or Encino?
Either one. I guess, are we in Encino?
Encino,
yeah.
Yeah.
A little mix up on mine. But anyway, so I interviewed you 2023.
Yes, almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, almost 2 years ago. And at the time, I think it was in 25 years, your businesses have done over $600 million.
Correct, yes.
That is incredible.
Yes. And at the time, you guys had 500,000 followers. Now you have 5 million.
Yeah, 12 million across social.
12 million.
So, absolutely.
I love seeing how much you guys have grown.
Thank
Seriously.
you, my friend.
Yeah, and what I loved about what you guys did is how consistent you guys were, like just nonstop consistency, and you guys were taking action every day. And every day I'd see you in a different city, it seemed like. And I love the hustle, and it's great to see you guys succeed the way you're succeeding.
We have a saying that we love at the School of Hard Knocks is you got to book that flight. You got to go out and make it happen. If you get the opportunity, you got to take the risk, or if you lose the chance. And
it's crazy because a lot of people can do things for a day, maybe a couple weeks, maybe a couple months. It's rare that people can go a year and then 2 years, 5 years, and that's really where it happens.
100%. Well, they just get way too comfortable.
They get too comfortable, exactly.
Right? And if you get comfortable, somebody's going to come up and smoke you.
100%, yeah. And I would say this about consistency: it's not about perfection. It's about progression, right? And if you can just be consistent and improve slowly but surely, then you get the big home run.
In James Clear's Atomic Habits, he said just a 1% improvement every single day will lead to exponential results over a lifetime.
You guys are a testament to that.
Yeah. So, like I said, thank you so much for having us out here. And we're going to be getting into, again, how you built your empire out here in California. But before we do that, I want to go back to the beginning because you've got a very fascinating and interesting story that I think a lot of people could hear. Maybe people that have seen you before, maybe they're familiar, but let's talk to those people that don't know Edwin. Let them know about, kind of the past that you come from.
Awesome. Yeah. So I was born in Bogota, Colombia. My parents and I came to the U.S. when I was 6 years old in search of that American dream. Unfortunately, that American dream became an American nightmare because due to some unfortunate circumstances, we lost everything we had. So much so that I had to become the head of household at 15 years old. And at the time, I was lucky enough to get a job working at a call center, which really wasn't the most ideal job for me because I was very shy and I was very timid. But I quickly got the courage to do this job I did not want to do, just out of desperation. Because at this point, I was just tired of seeing my mom not be able to pay for the rent at the end of the month. I was tired of us not being able to eat at the end of the month because we'd run out of food stamps. I was tired of my siblings and I living in this tiny little bedroom without any windows. It was always dark. And lastly, I was just tired of roaches waking me up in the middle of the night. So really, the avoidance of pain is what caused me to take action on something that really demanded more than what I thought I was worth. And even though I was very shy and even though I was very timid, the one thing that I had going for me, man, I was a huge dreamer. Like, I remember being 12 years old and my mom would leave me by myself because, I'd be on school break, but she had to go to work. And I'd spend hours and hours just thinking about how one day I was going to make $100,000 a year. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was like, I'm going to make $100,000 by the time I'm 21 years old. And I just became obsessed with that number. And really that number to me was a byproduct of being able to, give my parents what I promised them that one day I would do. And then the other thing I had going for me at a very young age was I just always felt like God was with me. My mom would always pray over me every morning, every night. She'd always tell me I was born to do something great. And that one day I was going to be so successful that I'd be able to talk about my faith. So that just gave me the courage to take on things that really demanded more than I thought I was worth.
So you didn't come from a rich family, but a rich family came from you.
Exactly. And, that was the idea. It was, I had these huge dreams, and then I just used common sense. I started working at a call center, and I'm like, okay, if I want to make $100,000 a year by the time I'm 21 years old, then I better become the manager by the age of 18 years old. And the idea was, by then I'd make $60,000 a year. And then I just started focusing on the positive stuff instead of the negative things, right? And I said, okay, the one thing I can control is my activity and my attitude. And I'm not going to pay attention to everything else that's telling me that there's no chance, right? Because the reality of it is, at the time, was that people that were ahead of me all had seniority over me. They were way smarter than me. They were going to college. They weren't timid. And I just thought to myself, okay, I don't have much talent, so I'm just going to take on the mindset of this like overachiever. And I became obsessed with doing all the boring stuff that no one else wanted to do. And part of that is just like showing up every day. I started showing up every day, no matter what. Whereas the people that were way more talented, they didn't show up every day. I started doing a lot of the role playing. They'd make us role play and practice our presentation before we get on the phones. They had these leadership development classes that we'd have to take an hour a day before we'd get on the phones. Well, the top salespeople never showed up to those things. And I just showed up to those things. And then I went to the top guy in the company. And again, all common sense stuff. I said, hey, do you mind if you record your pitch for me? And I had a Radio Shack recorder. This kind of date myself, but I bought a Radio Shack recorder, and I said, can you record your pitch? And he recorded his pitch. And then I literally just studied that thing over and over. I learned it verbatim. I wrote it word for word, and I just studied it. Before I knew it, I sounded just like him. And I started to work on my tonality. The way he sounded, I started to sound. And next thing you know, my belief level went through the roof, because now I'm like, wait a minute, I sound like him, I walk like him, I talk like him, and he's the best guy. I should be the best guy. And little by little, I became the best guy at that company, and I became the manager at 18 years old. And that was a big moment in my life, because other than what I've always said, success, there's three things that you need. And other than hope and faith, you have to believe in yourself. And the reason is because you could only receive what your mind can accept. If your mind can't accept something, it's never going to get it. And you have to build your identity, because you're never going to out-earn your self-worth. So one of the ways that you build and you start believing in yourself is by putting yourself in a circumstance that demands more than you think you're worth, and then succeeding at it. But if we really analyze something, if something demands more than you think you're worth, you're probably not going to want to do it, because it's going to scare you. The fear is going to paralyze you, and you're never going to attempt it, right? But the idea is, if your faith is big enough, if your dreams are big enough, you're going to want to step into that uncertainty of something that demands more than you think you're worth. And for me, I always like talking about the call center story, because that was me stepping into the uncertainty of something that demanded more than I thought I was worth. And if I would have just focused on the negative, I would have never done it. But my dreams are big enough. My faith was big enough that I actually stepped in it, and I succeeded at it. And then that's how you build your identity. And then the other part is when you start hanging around with people that are doing better than you, like for me, I became the right hand of the VP of sales, and I started learning from him. And then that made my mind accept that I deserve more. So I always tell people that we all have this unlimited potential. Everyone has this unlimited potential. However, it is limited to where you're at today. So like at 15 years old, did I dream the lifestyle that I have today? 100%. Did I believe it? Heck no, I didn't believe it. But every step every accomplishment that I made me believe a little more. So at 18 years old, when I became the youngest manager in company history, I started to believe a little bit more. I started making about $60,000 a year at that point. And then I started to believe maybe I am worth $100,000 a year because I'm 18. I'm already making 60. I should be making 100 by the time I'm 21, right? So belief drives everything. And sometimes, you got to, yes, sure, you have to have big dreams, right? But if you just focus on that big dream and that's it, you'll get discouraged because that big dream will seem so far away. But if you have your targets, then every target you hit now untaps a new level of belief, right? This is why the pursuit of your greatness is not a destination. It's your, it's not a destination. It's basically, it's the potential for you to become the best version of yourself. And there's never the best potential of yourself because every time you reach your best, now you untap a new level of belief.
There's probably a lot of young entrepreneurs or people that have big dreams, kind of like you when you were 15.
Yeah.
That have, I want the lifestyle, I want the car, I want the life, I want to travel, do all these amazing things. But it seemed like for you, you had that, but you were looking just at the next step ahead. I always like to say that you want to have macro patience, but micro urgency. So you have this massive dream, but it seems like a lot of young people, they have it flipped where they're just like, I want the car now. I want the job now. I want this now. And they're not putting in the work every single day to make that happen. As you were kind of going to that $100,000 mark and beyond that, how did you sort of find the ability to just sort of like look ahead and be like, okay, like I need to get to that next level that maybe, people that are like you when you were 15 that were in those shoes that they're watching today, how can they sort of find that and work towards that?
Well, I think the idea is that for me, I always found a new purpose. So like once I'd accomplish a new purpose, then obviously you need to find a new game to play. And what happens is if you don't find a new game to play, you start getting you start getting comfortable, right? And if the idea for me at least, in regards to finding a new purpose, like I think people worry about the what, the when, the where, the how all the time, and they don't focus on the why. And the why is the most important part. And the why is usually the dreams that God has placed in your heart, or it's either the love of other people, right? For me, what drove me at first was the love for my parents. I promised my dad that when he got out of jail, he'd never have to work a day in his life so that he wouldn't go back to the industry that landed him in jail. I promised my mom that one day I would buy her dream house. So it's that love for them that really drove me to go past my own capabilities, right? And then I also had these like huge dreams of like one day buying my home in Hollywood Hills and having a house on the beach and just sort of living the lifestyle that I live today. And then once I knew that why, then it was all about finding the opportunity that would allow me to make the kind of money that I would need to go make to make those dreams happen. And what made that happen was me going and starting a door-to-door home security company. Now at the time, I didn't want to go do door-to-door sales, but I didn't really care because my why was I knew I needed that to make my dreams happen. So I think for me, the most important thing is your why. And really another way to look at your purpose is that's hope, right? Hope, to me, the meaning of hope, it's something that you're looking forward to. Now that typically is your purpose, and that typically is the dreams that God placed in your heart. Now, I think what happens to people is they sell out on their dream, right? See, if your dream isn't big enough, you're not going to want to step into the uncertainty of something that demands more than you think you're worth because it's not big enough. Why would you want to? And that's why, your purpose has to be big enough to fight off your mind when your mind tries to tell you that the task is too big. Your purpose has to be big enough to fight off your body when it tells you, I'm tired, I don't want to go on. If your purpose is big enough, then your mind and body won't matter because at that point your spirit will take over, your will will take over, and it'll get your mind and body to just keep going even though it doesn't want to go, right? And, when you think about it, we're a three, we're a three, what's the word I'm looking for? Really, when we look at ourselves, we're a three-part being, right? There's the spirit. That's the part that goes with you, that lives with you in eternity. There's your soul, and there's your body. The soul, that's your mind. Those are your emotions, and that's your will. That's the part that the enemy is always trying to attack. It's your soul, right? The mind, it's always being attacked, right? Your emotions. And that's why you have to be able to control those emotions and your bad thoughts. If you think about it, we never overthink great thoughts. So if we don't overthink great thoughts, why are we going to overthink bad thoughts? But if you really think about it, every time you overthink something, it's usually negative stuff. Like, you're never going to overthink how great life is, but you'll spend hours overthinking of how bad things are, right? And that's when you get attacked, and that's the soul part, right? So so it's always about, for me, it's been the why, and it's finding that new why after you accomplish, new great things. Most people, what happens is, I think we were talking about this earlier, James, right? Where you accomplish something, but then you get comfortable and you don't find a new purpose, right? And really, when you have a new purpose, that comes with its new set of problems. And I think I was telling you, Josh, right? What's the point of having big faith if you have no problems? See, people want faith, but they want no problems. But if you're not going to have any problems, then why do you need big faith, right? You don't need faith if you don't have problems. So problems are actually a good thing, right? That those are the challenges. That's how you're going to grow. And for me, I've always loved big challenges, and I know that these big challenges I've always had big dreams. Big dreams come with big challenges, and this is, for me, that's why I've always embraced uncertainty, because it's in uncertainty where my need for God gets heightened. It's there where He's always met me, and it's there where we've always accomplished some great things together. See, if when you're going after big dreams, you're going to have big problems, and self-sufficiency at that point isn't an option anymore.
You were just talking about uncertainty, and for a lot of people watching right now, they may be uncertain about maybe starting a new career path or just trying something new. But something that stood out to me was the fact that you had approached the top salesperson in your company and asked him for his advice and pretty much got him to record his pitch. And that's something I always encourage my friends to do, is look, if you want to try something new, go out and approach someone who's been successful in the industry that you want to be in, and take them out for coffee and just try to be a sponge and learn as much as you can from them. What's the number one thing that you noticed and learned from the person that you interviewed that was crushing it in sales, and you noticed that they were doing differently that others weren't doing?
Well, first of all, I think as far as uncertainty, if you play it safe all the time, you're technically squeezing God out of the formula. If you only do what you know, or you only do the things that you're certain you're going to succeed at, then there is no need for God. And that's why I was saying earlier, that's why for me, I've loved uncertainty, because that's where I know I'm going to grow. That's where my need for God is heightened, and that's where He's always met me, and we've done some great things together. So I always tell people, don't play it safe. If you're going to go after your dreams, it's going to be scary, right? On the other side of your fear is your freedom. On the other side of your pain is your greatness. On the other side of your failure is your future. So I definitely don't play it safe, and especially if you want to be very, very successful, right? The bigger the dream, the bigger the problem. It's just the way life is. But what I noticed about the guy was his confidence was just through the roof. And at the end of the day, like I said, belief drives everything. The most certain person is always going to influence the less certain person. And what I became obsessed about at the time was learning his presentation, because in my head, right, your mind needs to accept that it deserves more. I'm like, if I can learn the pitch word for word the way he is saying it, then I know I'm going to crush it. And I started to focus on his tonality. I started to focus on his body language, right? But when you know the presentation so well that you don't have to think about it and it's reflexive, then the beauty of that is because it's so reflexive and you don't have to think about it, you get to focus on your body language. You get to focus on your tonality. And that's really at the end of the day what matters when you're trying to persuade someone. It's 90% nonverbal communication, 45% tonality, 45% body language, but it's only 10% what you're actually saying. See, people care more about how they feel than what you're saying. So your body language, your tonality, your enthusiasm, that makes people feel a certain way. See, you could only transfer what you're experiencing. So if you're experiencing confidence, then that's what I'm going to transfer to you, and that's why you're going to want to do business with me. But if I'm scared because I don't know what I'm going to say, right, then that's what I'm going to transfer to you. Ignorance gives you fear. And if I transfer fear to you, you're not going to want to do business with me, right? So that's what I got from him, and I just basically copied everything he did. I did what Kobe did to Michael Jordan, right? I just copied everything. But like, why wouldn't you copy the best that's ever played the game?
So I want to go back to those early days to let people know when you first started to build Skyline Security, and before you had everything figured out, you went and bought like 2 vans. Right?
I did, yeah.
Can you talk about that real quick, and then I'll ask a follow-up that I wanted to ask you.
Yeah, so when I first started the company, I went 10 days. So first of all, I left a job that was paying me $70,000 a year, right? And the first 10 days that I went out there, I did not have any success. I didn't have any sales. The only reason I stayed doing the business was because my brother-in-law at the time was doing 2 sales a day. And I was like, well, wait a minute. If this guy's doing 2 sales a day, I should be doing 2 sales a day because I know I'm just as good as him. And what I realized at the time is that I never really went all in at the beginning. I never really learned the pitch. So every time I was going out there, because I was ignorant, I had this fear. So everyone was just, slamming the door on me, right? And what I did is 10 days later, I'm like, wait, I know what the problem is. The problem is I haven't fully left the call center because I had talked to my seniors at the time and they allowed me to change my schedule around. So what happened is I still worked at the call center from 7 to 3, and then I went and I was working on my own business from 4 to 10. The problem was I didn't have any urgency. I didn't have any urgency because I was still making $1,500 a week working at the call center. And it wasn't until basically I burned the boats and I basically officially resigned from the call center and I wasn't making that $1,500 a week that all of a sudden my urgency picked up. All of a sudden what I couldn't remember, like my presentation, I learned it in one day. I learned my objections in one day. All of a sudden I knew everything verbatim, and now knowledge gives you confidence when you actually apply it. And that first day I went out there and I got 5 sales in one day, and I made $1,500 in one day. So now I made in one day what I used to make at the other place in a week, working 70 hours a week. And then I just thought to myself, damn, imagine if I could do this every day. And man, you talk about dreams, man. I started dreaming like crazy. And then I just went to work like crazy. And that week I did 12 sales for the week, which I think I made like $7,000 that week.
When you started to sell, did you have everything figured out? Did you like have all the, installment ready to go, or were you just going out there to close?
Well, the first 10 days I didn't have it figured out, and that's why I got my ass kicked every day. And that's what I mean. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past. Until you experience something, you don't really believe it, right? And the problem with me is I didn't study. I was a little arrogant because I'm like, I did so well at the call center, I should kick ass doing this. But I never actually studied the material. And it wasn't until I actually studied the material and I knew the presentation, I knew the rebuttals, I knew how to do the paperwork, and I knew it to the point where it was reflexive. I didn't have to think about it. And then that's really when the sales popped off. And then one of the great things I did that same week, even though I made $7,000 that week, I immediately went to an open house and I started to work on my goal, which was to buy my mom her house. And the beauty about doing that, it gave me a roadmap on what I needed to do to get to buy her the house. So now I call those, so I had the goal, and then I made myself a target on buying her house in 90 days. And then one of the things I did is I bought the minivan before I actually had the salespeople. And the idea behind that is that faith is taking action before you have what you need. And for me, on the business, I didn't have the people yet, but I knew they were coming. And the van just created an urgency for me to now go get the salespeople, because now I'm like 21 years old. I'm like, I know I didn't just buy a minivan to ride around in a minivan. If I'm gonna have a minivan, it's because I'm going to fill it up. And that's what I did. And it's the same thing with your dreams. You have to go touch the dream before you have what you need. So like I started staying at nice hotels before I could afford my dream houses. But staying at the nice hotel, even though I could only stay there for a day or two, it got my subconscious mind to like figure out like, okay, if you want this lifestyle, this is why you go work. And that's why you have to reward yourself. A lot of people don't reward themselves because they have a bad relationship with money. And one of the smart things that I think I did is I'd work hard and then I would reward myself just a bit to remind me like, this is why you work hard. But again, you can't improve on something that you're not aware of. Right? So if you've never stayed at a very nice hotel, why would you want to work your ass off to go make it happen? But staying at those places made me realize that, wow, I should buy a house so it feels like I'm at a hotel all the time. But it was like those little bits that of rewarding myself that made me want to work harder. And again, that's why you want to touch the dream before you have what you need. And here's the thing, right? Remember what I said. To build your identity, you have to put yourself in a circumstance that demands more than you think you're worth, right? Well, the first time I stayed at a nice hotel, that demanded more than I thought I was worth. So I was nervous. The first time I went to a Mercedes dealership, I was 21 years old. I'm like, man, they're going to kick me out. Like, they're going to think I don't belong here. But then when I went and I actually did it and I succeeded at it, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I do belong here. And it got my mind to believe that maybe you do belong here.
So, and the reason why I asked you to tell the story about you bought the minivans before you even had the salespeople is, I'll have a lot of subscribers and people that follow our channel that will come up and ask me and say, hey, what's your best advice for me trying to start a business in today's world? And I've thought about the question a lot because, I get asked it all the time at this point. And to me, I've come to the decision that like the best advice that I can give to somebody, and it's what I see that holds a lot of people back, which is that at a certain point, you need to sell it first and then figure it out. Yeah. Because otherwise, they get caught in that procrastination. If you don't create the urgency, like if you go and get that sale, you got the money in, you close the business, now you'll get everything else figured out. You know what I mean? Now you put the pressure on yourself, and you're a huge advocate of, low pressure, low performance. When you have high pressure, you have to perform. You don't have you have no choice. You have to perform. You have to service that client, but you need to sell it and figure it out. How did you and how important is it to adopt that mindset in business? Because to me, I think that's maybe the most important thing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the how is the killer of all dreams, right? You get stuck on the how, right? And it's why I think it's always
Hold on. I gotta write that one down. Say that again. The how is the killer of all dreams.
Yeah. So the how is the killer of all dreams, right? People are always waiting for this perfect time, and it's not about perfection, it's about progression, right? And for me, it's always about the why first. And as simple as this is going to sound, right? To succeed, and money's not everything, but whatever you think, whatever the amount of money that you think you'll need to succeed, right, is, as common sense as it sounds, it's the way I did it, right? You need two things. You need to find an opportunity that allows you to make that kind of money. And then the number two thing you need is you need to find someone who's done it before, who has a vested interest in your success, that's going to help you do it. Now, the hardest part is that number two, right? Finding someone who's done it before, who's got a vested interest in your success is going to help you do it, because most people aren't going to have the time. But if you could actually do that, then the only way you really wouldn't succeed is if you don't put the time and the work ethic in, and the consistency and the discipline. That's the only way you won't succeed. And I think, to me, that's that, right? But yeah, for me, it wasn't about the how. It was about the why. And then eventually you'll figure out the how, right? And, sometimes people think that successful people make the right choices all the time. And the reality of it is they don't make the right choices. They actually make wrong choices all the time. The difference is that they're relentless until they figure it out. Whereas average people, they try it once, the minute it doesn't work, they stop.
Yeah, and earlier you were talking about how basically, and sort of what James is bringing on about the sell it first and then figure it out. One of the things that you were kind of bringing up is like, I bought the minivan before the salespeople, and a lot of people, in order to move fast in business, like, you just have to make decisions like that to figure it out. But the problem is so many people that they're stuck. They don't have that. They don't have that faith element to where that they're able to have faith that it's going to work out and believing into that purpose. So for people out there watching that might be struggling with that, how can they develop the ability to have faith and move forward in that?
So great question. I think, so the disclaimer about putting yourself in a pressure situation that increases your urgency is, in order for that to work, you have to have a history of you keeping the promises that you make to yourself. Again, at the end of the day, it all comes down to your identity, right? And your identity is built on whether or not you keep the promises you make to yourself. Because what happens is, even when we say keeping the promises you make to yourself, the reason that's important is because we think no one is watching. The problem is there's one person or one thing watching, which is your subconscious mind. And every time you don't keep a promise you make to yourself, your subconscious mind is taking tabs of it, right? You're taking tabs. Yep, there he goes. Once again, didn't keep his promise. So what happens is, the reason that's so important for people to understand is that your subconscious mind is always going to prove itself correct. Whatever your subconscious mind thinks, it will prove itself correct. So deep down, we all think our self-worth is, we all know what our self-worth is, and it's rooted deep down in our thoughts, right? So what happens is, your conscious mind will say, yep, I'm going to be the top sales guy at this company, right? Or I'm going to go make $1 million, or I'm going to go get 5 million followers, right? Or 20 million followers. The problem is, which, by the way, that's the way it should work. You first should declare it, right? Like, this is what I'm going to do. The problem is your subconscious mind doesn't believe you. And because it doesn't believe you, it's going to start to self-sabotage you to come back down to what you really think you're worth. So you'll be on your way to making $1 million, but because your subconscious mind only thinks you're worth about $100,000 a year or $30,000 a year, it'll start putting thoughts in your mind to self-sabotage you to come back down to that $30,000 a year. So the way you beat that is, now, again, you can't improve on something you're not aware of, but now that you're aware of it, now you just become intentional about keeping the promises that you make to yourself. And every time you keep the promise you make to yourself, you get a win. And then you get another win. And then you get another win. And then you get another win. And each time you do that, your subconscious mind begins to rise and rise and rise. And whenever you can get your subconscious mind to align with what your conscious mind is saying, then you'll start attracting all the people that you'll need to make those dreams happen. And that's why it's so important to keep the promises you make to yourself. And that's where confidence truly comes from.
Were your parents entrepreneurs?
They weren't, yeah.
So if your parents weren't entrepreneurs and you went out and built a company that's done over $600 million in sales, so you told James, you went out and you got the Vans. You had the self-belief, like, look, I'm going to just start making sales and I'm going to figure it out. So how did you go from practically zero to building a $600 million company?
So it all comes back to that belief level, right? And I focused, at a young age, I started to realize what my superpowers were, what my gifts were. And I think everybody in life, we're all given gifts. And for me, I knew that I was really good at selling. I became good at selling and influence. I became really good at taking something that was complex and making it simple, right? I became really good at making things dumb-proof. And a lot of that was because, for me, it was hard to understand things. So I had to sort of dumb-proof for me, but then it allowed me to teach it to the masses. So I became a really good trainer. And then I also realized that I was pretty good at leading people. And those were really the only things I knew I was good at, right? And then I just had so that's what I focused on. And then I had the faith that God would bring the right people to make the impossible possible. So there's a lot of things that I didn't know. Like, I didn't know how we were going to I didn't know how we were going to go from being in one state to now we're in over 36 states. No idea. At the time I had 20 installers. I had no idea how we were going to have over 200 installers. At the time I had 15 sales reps. I didn't have an idea of really how I was going to get to 500, right? But I knew that if I just focused on what I can control, the right people would start showing up. And I started taking action before I had what I needed. And the right people have always started to show up. But I think that comes back to your belief level, right? You'll start attracting people that you need to get your business to the next level the minute you truly, truly start to believe that you deserve that.
Now, it took you 17 years at Skyline to hit $40 million in sales.
Correct.
But you started a solar company a couple of years ago, and in the first year, you did $40 million.
Correct, yeah.
So 17 years to hit 40 million, but then your first year in solar, you hit 40 million. What was the biggest thing that you did to hit $40 million in your first year in solar? You know, because again, it took 17 years to hit it in Skyline, the security company, but then you did it in 1 year in solar. What would you attribute that to on how you went from 0 to 40 million in 1 year?
Well, I think it goes back to the confidence, right? So at some point you have to sacrifice, right? Like, the reason we were able to do that in 1 year was because of the 17 years of like just grinding, nonstop grinding, right? So a lot of times, you know, and life has a way of just working stuff out like that. Sometimes you can get your butt kicked for 5 years, just straight 5 years getting your butt kicked. And on the 6th year, you wake up and you're the biggest in the planet, right? I just think so sometimes I think what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs that are just getting started, they think, oh, this guy did it in 1 year, I should be able to make it in 1 year. But what they don't realize is they've worked their ass off in another industry for 17 years. So it wasn't really that they were able to do it in 1 year. It's like they developed the muscles that they needed so that when things got harder, they just got better. They made it look maybe easy, but it wasn't easier. It was actually a lot harder. They just got better. And the reason they've gotten better is because they've gone through the pain of that you have to go through in business, right? If you're going to sustain success for a long time in business, you're going to have to go through bad times. I mean, it's inevitable. Like, in the 25 years that I've been in business, it's probably been five times where I've been knocked down, like uppercut punch, knocked down, like where it looked like a knockout. And then I had to figure out a way to rise up and figure it out. And every time I rose up and figured it out, it's like I developed muscles for the next punch that came. And every time a harder punch came, it was easier for me to take that punch because of the other punches I had taken, right? And it's why you don't want to run away from pain. You want to go through the pain, because when you go through the pain, that's when you build those muscles that you'll need when life gets harder. And again, it doesn't get easier. People think, oh, the more successful you become, the easier it gets. No, it gets harder. You just make it look easier because you've gotten better, but it's because you haven't ran away from it, right? And every time you run through the pain, you're building grit, you're building fortitude, you're building resiliency. And I think resiliency is the most important thing that you need in business, because especially if you're about sustaining business for a long time, you got to be resilient. You got to be able to bounce back.
So we have a saying that we post to during our interviews that we've pulled on, that concentration builds wealth, diversification keeps it. And so you were extremely successful with security. What was the mentality behind wanting to go into solar and embark on this new industry? And what would your recommendation be for like entrepreneurs that are crushing it in one dimension and potentially wanting to make that leap?
Well, for me, what happened is, your business becomes so big that you sort of have the economy of scale. Now you have executives that can guide you into getting into other businesses. So for me, I was like, well, I'm already paying top dollar for my executives. I might as well use their brains to get into another business. And again, my superpower was my ability to recruit, right? Influence. If you're good at influencing, you're going to be able to recruit. And part of starting a business is you have to get good at hiring. Well, hiring is recruiting, right? People think recruiting is like a curse word. And if you're going to start your own business, then you need to be able to recruit the best of the best. And the best of the best are going to have options. So you better be good at influencing them to come work for you. And at the time, I was just like, man, I got these like top executives, like, let's figure out this solar thing. And what also helped out for me was that it was very similar to what I already did with home security as far as how to run it. It was just, it's a different product, but the what I already had in place, it kind of worked out very nicely together. And then for me, real estate has just always been a big thing. As far as my business has always been great with cash flow, and a business that I've never lost any money in has been real estate. And funny enough, the real estate I have today, they were just dream homes that I eventually, as I moved on to a different dream home and a different dream home, I didn't want to sell them, and now I make great rental on those homes. But your dream home is never going to be your first home, right? You're gonna, as you get better, you're gonna have better opportunities and so on. But that was one of the ways that I didn't know that I was getting into real estate, but I actually did. And to this day, I've yet to lose money on a house. Every time I think there's no way people are gonna pay more money for this house, they do. And and again, if you have a business that has great cash flow, then you can't not go wrong with real estate. And in my experience,
We were sitting down with a gentleman named Stephen Bartlett the other day. He has the podcast Diary of a CEO.
okay.
And when we were sitting down with him, he was saying that he spends probably 30 to 35 hours a week just on recruiting and trying to bring in great talent to the team. Mm-hmm. Because if you realize, like, as a CEO, you only have so much time in the day, and you need to surround yourself with just great people around you who can help, accomplish the mission. So I'm curious, like, you as a CEO, how has your role, like, what does your role look like now as a CEO in terms of your day-to-day, and how has that evolved over time versus, like, when you were just starting out?
Well, my day-to-day, it depends on, I try to focus on what is needed the most, and then whatever is needed the most, I'll go in there for a bit and then get myself out, right? So the idea is not to get in the trenches for a long time, right? Whereas at first it might have, right? Like at first I was on the doors for 10 years and I was training people, I was recruiting people, I was leading the team, and I really just lived on the sales side. All the other stuff I kind of managed, but I was really just in that, right? Now I think the main thing on the CEO is you go into different areas of the business that maybe are struggling at the time, and then you come in and you come out and somebody runs it for you, right? But I've always been on big on inspect what you expect, and if there's a part of your business that isn't doing well, you go and inspect it and you see what the problem is, you identify what the problem is, and then you figure out a way where it doesn't happen again. Like, what can you do so that this same problem doesn't happen again? But I've always been very blessed to just hire people that are a lot better at these other things that I have no clue about, But again, that goes back to why businesses stay small is they don't want to invest the money into someone that's going to take them to the next level. And you're committed when you put your money behind it. So in 2009, when I made the jump from like a smaller business to like a mid-level business, is really when I made the investment to go get a CFO. And that CFO cost me $150,000 for the year. That was his salary. This is back in 2009. And I remember thinking to myself, man, that's $150,000. I could be buying a Ferrari for that price. And what if this guy doesn't work out and blah, blah, blah. But it was probably one of the best investments I ever made. But then also by investing $150,000 into that CFO, it made me want to work harder, because I'm like, well, now we have to grow because I just invested in this guy. And if I just invested in this guy to stay the same, then what was the point of, I just threw my $150,000 away. So it created this urgency in me to go build bigger sales teams, right? So on a Saturday where I would probably take time off because I'm like, all right, we're making money. I'm like, no, I just invested 150 grand this year. And by the way, it wasn't just 150 grand. I invested probably 700 grand because then I started, in addition to the CFO, we went from 8 office employees to like 50. So now I had all these salaries that I was paying. But now I'm like, man, I hit the road every day. And to your question, at that time, it was all recruiting, training, because I needed to fill up the sales teams to, because now I was paying so much for the operations that I'm like, I need to bring the sales. So, most people, I've always been big, and I think the reason I've survived big punches is because I've always tried to get the foundation strong of the operations before I bring the sales. Most people are like, oh, once I bring the sales, then I'll go get the operations. The problem is when that happens, you get your butt kicked because now the operations can't facilitate the sales and you grow too fast, and that's how you're out of business.
So it's almost like in the beginning, sell and then figure it out. But as you have a proven product, you have to flip it. And it's like, hey, let's build the infrastructure so we build a good reputation and good product and then focus on the sales.
Correct.
So it's almost like there's a flip that happens.
Right. But so to give you like real time, that year I had made, I think $1 million that year. So I basically took $1 million. I invested 800 grand into it back, 700, 800 grand back into the company. So with that 800 grand, I brought the CFO and I brought in the extra employees, right? So I still had 300 grand for myself or 200 grand for myself. Make sense? So even if I would have screwed it up, I would have been able to pay my bills, right? So I left some reserves there just in case, right? It wasn't like I made $1 million and I took that $1 million and I dumped all the $1 million into the company again, right? It's like, okay, I made $1 million. I'm going to invest 800 grand of it. But you know what? I could live on 300 to 200 grand to pay my bills just in case shit hits the fan. But I was very competitive where I'm like, there's no way I'm going to lose 800 grand or 700 grand that I just invested in growing this company. So I'm going to go work my ass off, right? So it creates this different level of urgency to get your ass up and go make it happen. What happens is if you just sit on $1 million and now you think you're on top of the world, you're like, yeah, I don't need to go work today. Yeah, I don't need to go work tomorrow. I don't need to go work the next day because you're just thinking you have a lot of money, right? And before you know it, that money just blows by you and you're back to square one because you didn't invest back into your business.
I think you have a fascinating perspective on sales. Yeah. And, you talk a lot about conviction, the transfer of belief. Like that person has to believe that you believe in what it is that you're trying to sell to them.
That's exactly it, yeah.
But I'm going to challenge you real quick. Mm-hmm. Let's say I was hiring you as my sales coach. Could you give me an example of, let's say you're going up to my door, maybe to kind of sell me, and I want to see how you kind of handle these objections. I got to see the man behind, because you've created some of the best salesmen as well. I know some of your salesmen have made millions of dollars. So
what's interesting about that is like I've never been great. That's why I've never considered myself a great salesperson, because like my wife is great at winging stuff. She can go and she can wing it. And so what I've always done, and this is like for all you people out there that you think you can't be salespeople, I first have to learn a pitch, and like first I'll write it down and then I'll memorize the crap out of it, right? But the idea is you want to memorize it so then you can internalize it and then you personalize it, right? And then when you do that, you operate with certainty, right? So if I were to do it right now, I'd probably suck at it because I'll have no certainty because I'm trying to wing it. Now, some people have that gift. I've never had that gift. Even when you see me speak for 45 minutes on stage, I've literally memorized that entire 45-minute pitch or presentation, right? Now, I took the time to write it, right? But then I memorize it, right? And then I internalize it, and then I personalize it. So when you know it so well, you can make a left, you can make a right, you can come back here. You could focus on the body language of everybody that's speaking to you. Oh, people seem a little dead right now, so let me raise up my tonality so they can listen, so they can actually listen and demand attention, right? But the reason I'm being vulnerable with you guys is like, yeah, that's how a shy, timid kid became one of the best in the industry that I'm in. It's just because I worked my ass off on it, but I'm not good at winging it, But most people are like, oh, they would have tried to wing it. I'm like, no, just I need Go ahead.
Prior to Hard Knocks, I did door-to-door sales, and I was the exact same way. So I was setting up appointments for a roofing and exterior remodeling company, and I was like, absolutely terrified the first couple of doors that you knocked on. It's like, man, like, these people don't want me knocking on the door right now, you know?
Right.
And you see someone else set some appointments. It's like, oh, like he can do it, I can do it. And then it's like you said, you learn the script, absolutely memorize it, and then you're just pretty much going verbatim with what the script says. But I realized when I was able to really just make it my own script and I started to kind of free flow in my own way, I saw so much more success because it's like almost like you said, is when you're speaking at it from your own perspective, point of view, and it's very personal to you, you're speaking to the client with another level of certainty, and you just sound so much more convincing, and there's another level of confidence there that people buy into.
Yeah, 100%. And there's this confusion that happens when, I don't want to learn something word for word because then I'm going to sound like a robot, right? That's really an excuse that people make that don't want to put in the work. Once you memorize something verbatim, you can easily personalize it, right? But the whole idea is if you learn something verbatim from a guy that's doing, let's say, 10 sales a week and he's the top guy in your company, it'll just give you that extra confidence that you'll need because you're like, wait, I'm doing it just like him. I have his tonality. I have his body language, right? And even if that's not you, eventually that becomes you. And again, I'm speaking more from this shy, timid kid that had no confidence, right? So I needed to gain my confidence from different places. And my number one confidence I got from my faith, right? I knew that God was with me. That's where I really got confidence. And by the way, that's one confidence that never goes out, right? Because eventually your looks will fade away, your money might fade away, your confidence in God, that never goes away, So, for me, I've just been a big believer in learning things verbatim. One of the things that I don't share as much, I was so shy and I was so timid as a kid that one of the things I don't share quite a bit of is at 15 years old, when I got that job at a call center, I was so shy and I was so timid that no one would hire me. And I went to like 16 different job interviews, and I would get so nervous that I'd start sweating all over the place with how nervous I got. So people wouldn't hire me because they probably thought I was on drugs. So finally, a friend of mine that I went to school with says, hey, I found this company. They hire anybody. Just show up and I promise you they'll hire you. And I got all excited. So, of course, I show up to the job interview. And 2 minutes into the job interview, the guy's giving me a paper towel because I started sweating all over the place. And then I got really nervous. And by the end of that interview, I looked like I just ran a marathon. And I had a white collared shirt on. It's why whenever I do interviews, I wear all black. You'll never see me with a white shirt doing an interview or on stage doing an interview because I'm still afraid, like, what if I get nervous and I start sweating all over the place, right? And what's interesting is, so that day, I do the job interview, I don't get the job. And I'm walking back to my car, and I'm just discouraged like I've never been before. And I remember going into the restroom and like washing my face off. And I remember thinking to myself, like, how am I going to help my family get out of the situation that I'm in? And I just started praying to God. I said, God, just give me a shot. I promise you, if you find me a job, I'll work harder than anybody's ever worked, and I'll always praise your name. And some people call this coincidence. I obviously don't think it's coincidence, but when I left that restroom, there was a gentleman that was there, and he says, hey, kid, when do you start? I said, I don't start. You guys are full. He said, who told you that? I said, well, the person I just interviewed with. And he starts laughing. He's like, no, we're hiring. And he says, come with me, kid. And he takes me over to the HR room, and he says, I need you to hire this kid. And that same person is the same person who 6 years later helps me start the security company. So I'm a firm believer that in life, you just need a shot. In life, you just need someone who that's going to be with you, that's going to teach you a business, that's going to be patient with you, that's going to help you that's going to help you with the business. So, for me, that's everything, and that's why I always say, like, you need to find an industry that allows you to make the kind of money you want, and then you need to find someone who's got a vested interest in your success that's going to help you do it. But because of that, I tell you that story so that you know why it's so important for me to memorize stuff, right? Because if I go in there and wing it and get nervous, believe it or not, as confident as you might think I am still, if I get really nervous, I'll start sweating all over the place. In fact, it happened to me on the red carpet once. And luckily I made this excuse that I needed to go pee, go use the restroom, and I left right before I just got showered in sweat. But that's where I get confidence. My confidence comes from preparation. And again, I tell you guys this story because sometimes people don't like to talk about and be vulnerable about, some of their fears, And for me, that's one of my fears is I get nervous, I start stuttering, I start freaking sweating all over the place.
And I mean, hearing you talk about a nervous, stuttering kid, it's insane that now today you're a 9-figure CEO.
Yeah.
And so as a 9-figure CEO, one of the quotes that I've actually heard you say is your dreams have to be so big that everyone else's can fit inside of them. And so as our team's expanding here at Hard Knocks, we're trying to, pass on a vision to the people that we bring in. And as James mentioned, you have a ton of salespeople that have worked under you that have made millions of dollars. How, as a leader, have you been able to impose, what are some leadership traits and skills that, for those listening, that they could take away in order to build a great company and pass on that vision to your organization? How do you lift people up to become $1 million salespeople under you?
So great question. I think, one of the greatest gifts that you as a leader can give your juniors is making them think that they can, making them think that they can do something, right? Because if you can make them believe that they can do something, then they'll manifest it, right? And one of the ways that we've been able to do that at the company is we're really a personal development company that just happens to be in solar. We're really a personal development company that just happens to be in home security. And the idea is that if we could work on people's identity, right? Because a goal of mine is I want to create the most 6, 7, and 8-figure a year earners that our industry has ever created. Well, I already know from my own experience is that you could have the talent to make that money, but if you don't have the self-worth, you're never going to make it. And one of the great things that call center did for me when I worked there from 15 to 21 years old is they would invest in us and they would give us leadership development training an hour a day before we would get on the phones. And that's really, other than my faith, is what I attribute a lot of my success to, was that I was working on my mindset, right? So that's what we've been able to do really well at Skyline, is that the number one component to loyalty is education. And the reason is because when you can educate people on things that no one's ever taught them before, in their eyes, you immediately become an expert. And they respect you because this is an expert at what he does. The second thing it does, which is the biggest thing, it creates empathy and emotion in people. Why? Because you're teaching them things that they didn't even learn in college. You're teaching them things that most people won't want to teach them on. Like, some people think I'm crazy because I'm teaching my people to become entrepreneurs. They're like, why are you teaching them to do that? They're going to want to go be your competitor. And that's just scarcity thinking, because again, if your dream is big enough, then everybody's dream is going to fit inside of it. People leave you when you stop educating them, when you're no longer bringing value to them. But as long as you can continue to educate them, they're never going to want to leave you, right? But in order to do that, you have to continue to rise up as a leader, because the minute you get comfortable as a leader, you're now stunting the growth of everyone else beneath you, and now they'll probably leave you because they might surpass you at some point. So for me, again, education is huge at our company. We're also about competition. I love competition. Competitive people bring energy. Competitive people create energy. Competitive people create momentum. Competitive people keep people on edge. Competitive people get other people to go past their own capacity. So we're also in the competition business. And another one that's huge is we're also in the recognition business. People want to get recognized. People want to be seen. People want to feel like they matter, and people want to feel like they belong. In fact, one of the two most successful things you can do in your business is make them feel like what they do matters, and make them feel like they're progressing, right? If they feel like they're progressing, they're not going to leave you. More than money, people want to grow, right? And the money would just be a byproduct of them growing anyway.
Wow. Now, You talked about how like you're competing a lot in business, but one of the things that I remember from our last interview was you talked about you're always competing against yourself in particular.
Correct.
And, you know, a lot of people are very worried about what other people are doing. In fact, I remember in an interview with an Atlanta entrepreneur one time, he said that, you know, people are so worried about what everybody else is doing. You know, they're more worried about LeBron's stats than they are their own stats. You know, what are some ways that you've, you know, kept those blinders on, and how are you constantly competing against yourself in different aspects of your life beyond even just business? So like, what are some things on a daily basis, on a regular basis that you do to ensure that you're constantly outgrowing, getting to that next level?
So great question. And in fact, I'll give you a real life experience on this. In my industry, home security, there was a company that's to this day is still huge, right? And back in 2009, 2010, everyone started to compete against them and wanted to be just like them. So they all were trying to copy what they did. And they really just grew too fast because they were all worried about being the next X company, right? And I just started playing my own game, which was I'm going to compete against myself. And as long as I'm progressing and as long as I'm getting better every year, that's all I care about. And all these other companies started to hang themselves because they grew too fast. And little by little, I was like the tortoise that now is winning the race, right? Because I just did it my way, and I was growing every year, right? Because the idea is that you want, and some years I had a bad year, but the idea was I was able to invest my own money into it. I grew it gradually. And before I knew it, I had no competition because everybody else had gone out of business. And so that was a good example of why you want to compete against yourself. If I would have started looking and comparing myself to a way bigger company that was just way more talented than I was at the time, I probably would have crashed myself just like every other person did. So I had to remain confident. I'm disciplined. I had to remain disciplined because there were companies that were newer than me that were passing me up. And, you know, you could very well say to yourself, man, these guys are new and they already passed me up. But I already knew that I was putting in the work, so I didn't worry about that part because I was putting in the work, I was doing my thing. And I also knew my objective. My objective was to outlast the competition. My objective wasn't to be the biggest right away. It was let me leverage what I have going for myself, which was my youth. And I'm like, let me outlast everybody and let me just play that game. And in order to outlast everybody, let me just focus on us improving every year after that. So huge on stats, right? And basic stats, right? Like some people just take stuff for granted. Like most salespeople don't even know how much money they made in the first quarter. Well, if you don't know how much money you made in the first quarter, then how are you supposed to hit your goal for the year, right? And I used to do it by day, by week, by month, by quarter. And that's always how I keep track of stuff. I always look at the year before. What was I doing the year before around the last week of March? What did we do last year, the week of March? How do I compare it to this year?
In the process of building a 9-figure company, you've had to deal with obstacles and failures along the way.
Yeah.
And for people watching right now, they're in the process of building their own company as well. And I'm curious for you, if you could share a story about maybe one of the obstacles or failures that you dealt with and how you ultimately overcame it.
Yeah. So first of all, it's what I said earlier, right? On the other side of your failure is your future. And it's how you respond to the failures that's going to determine your future. And in business, you're going to have failures. It's not just going to be, you know, rainbows and sunshines every day. And it's really your ability to come back when you get punched in the face. I've had quite a bit of those. I think there's been a couple times big sales teams have left. Interestingly enough, they've all come back. But, you know, when you take a punch like that, you know, if you lose 25% of your sales team, that could be a big, big punch in our business. But you just got to go back to the basics. You focus on the things that you can control. And then all the other things you can't control, that's where your faith comes in. I think what happens to a lot of people is they start focusing on what they can't control. And if you focus on what you can't control, it robs you of your peace because you can't control that, right? So for me, I always went back to taking massive action toward things, right? One of the ways that you cure anxiety, frustration, worry, for me, has been taking massive action. The way to execute being overwhelmed is by overwhelming execution. For me, I start getting things done, right? There's tasks that I have, and I can start completing those tasks. And when you're feeling really overwhelmed is because you have a lot of things that you need to get done. Well, the problem is most people procrastinate and they don't get anything done. Versus if you just focus on getting one thing done, then you start building momentum, and then the next thing, right? So for me, it's during those tough moments that my recipe has always been, I just start taking massive action, right? And I start playing the law of big numbers, start taking just more at bats at the plate, and I become obsessed with repetition, right? Repetition for me has always been big, taking massive action.
For a lot of entrepreneurs and business people out there, the business side of things isn't everything. And in conversations with you, I know that there are different dimensions and aspects of your life, almost like pillars that you tend to focus on. I think you have a name for them. It's the 5 Fs. Could you break down what those are? And one thing that I love that when you describe about it is that, like, if one pillar of your life, it falls, then the other ones are going to start to crack as well.
Correct, yes. So the first one is faith. I mean, for me, that's everything. The second one is fitness. And the reason I put fitness prior to family is because if you don't feel good about yourself, doesn't matter how much love you have for somebody, if you're constantly tired, you're not really going to be able to transfer that love. So for me, it's working on myself, working on my mindset. So when I say fitness, that's body and mind. Again, it doesn't matter how much love you have for somebody. If you're feeling like crap inside, that's what you're going to transfer to your family. So you have to take time for your fitness. So for me, it's faith, then fitness, then family, then finance, and then fun. You need time to have fun, because if you stop having fun, you become ungrateful. So that's the importance of like rewarding yourself at times. And again, I've fallen for that, where there's times where I haven't rewarded myself, I haven't had any fun, and then I become bitter, right? You become bitter if you don't have fun. So for me, those pillars are huge. And the idea is that in life, different areas of your life will spike at different moments. So people ask all the time, is there such thing as balance? My answer to that is there's no such thing as balance. If you want to become really great at an area of your life, really great, you have to become obsessed by it, right? So the problem with that is that there's going to be other areas of your life that get affected. But what I've tried to do is that the key is to identify which areas you're not putting as much attention to, and then just become intentional about improving in those areas. Because as long as you're improving in those areas, you're not letting them die. What happens to most people is they become obsessed with one area of their life, and then they just go cold turkey and they forget about the other areas of their life. And all of a sudden, they don't work out whatsoever, right? Or they stop working on the mindset of the mind, right? On the mindset. And what happens is when you don't do something for a long time, you'll start to dislike it. And then what happens is eventually, if you're not growing, you're dying. And if one of those pillars dies, then it could possibly set off the other pillars to come crumbling down. And again, I tell you that from my personal experience, because in 2016, the pillar of mindset and fitness of the mind came crumbling down for me, because for 16, 17 years after I left the call center, I didn't pick up a book. I didn't listen to a podcast. I wasn't working on my mindset. And so eventually what ended up happening is that pillar started crumbling down, and I couldn't accept that I deserved more. All of a sudden, I felt like I didn't deserve the money I was making. And all of a sudden, all these like lies start coming in my mind saying, hey, Edwin, you're not smart enough. You've been getting lucky this entire time. You've been at the perfect time all the time, but now you're going to lose everything. Those are the kind of thoughts I started to get in my head. But I knew what the problem was. The problem was I knew that I had stopped doing the things that made me successful when I worked at that call center. And then that's when I started focusing again on the same way I worked on my body, I was going to work on my mind. And I started studying every day, no matter what, 30 minutes to an hour every day. And then from there, I started to build the confidence. And where that confidence came from was because I started studying people that were way more successful than I was. And when I started to study them, I realized that the things they were talking about were things that I had already done. I just couldn't articulate it. But again, you don't believe something in your heart until you experience it. So now that I saw these people making hundreds of millions of dollars, and I knew that I had experienced the same thing that they did, it made me believe that I was worth $100 million. And the minute I started to believe it, I started to attract the right people to make that dream happen.
What is a biblical principle that's had the greatest impact on your life? And in terms of what's enabled you to lean on God's understanding as opposed to somebody else's or of the world?
So there's a lot, right? There's one that a lot of people don't know about, but I'll tell you the first two that were big that my mom would always tell me. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. I think that's Proverbs 18:21. And I just always been big on declaring positive things, right? And I've always been very careful with declaring bad things or speaking, negative things to my children, right? So for me, that's always been sort of number one. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength, gives me confidence, right? But one that most people don't know about, I think, is Proverbs 24:16. It says, "For the righteous will fall 7 times, but they will rise again. But the wicked will crumble when calamity strikes." Right? So for the righteous will fall 7 times. See, I used to think that if I got closer to my faith, I wasn't going to have any problems. Like life was just going to be great. And that does not happen, right? You could be a person of faith and you're going to have a lot of problems, right? So the word 7 in the Bible really means infinite. That means, right, for the righteous will fall 7 times. It's not literally 7 times. That means you're going to fall, and you're going to fall, and you're going to fall, and you're going to fall. And all you have to do is rise one more time, right? And that's where that resiliency is built, right? Resiliency comes, for me, from being grateful, right? When you're grateful, you're unlikely to see failure as permanent, right? And because there's so many things that you're grateful for. Discipline is another thing that helps with resiliency. Like when shit hits the fan, are you going to remain disciplined? Most people don't remain disciplined. The minute shit hits the fan, they're drinking. They start doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Do you remain humble when you're going through pressure, right? Or do you become arrogant right away? Do you keep your word when you're going through pressure, or do you, are you about truth? Do you become, fear-based, or do you become courageous? So for me, that principle has always been huge for me, and one of the things that we were talking about earlier was whatever you do repetitively, you will respond reflexively under pressure. That's why I'm such a fan of repetition, right? Because repetition is everything. Because when it's not repetitive, then when you're under pressure, you will revert back to your habits, because habits are reflexive. This is why habits matter, right? Because anyone can do things when there is no pressure. Like when everything's great, of course you're doing it great. But what happens when you're down? What happens when the heat is on? What happens when the pressure is on? What do you revert back to, And for me, when the pressure's on, I revert back to what I always do, right? And that's why I'm big on cultivating gratitude, right? That's a huge one for me. I'm big on cultivating discipline, big on humility when the pressure's on. Again, are you about truth? Are you courageous? It's all about perseverance, generosity. For me, those are good characters that have helped me through tough times. See, if you think about it, all the attributes that we want are always hard, and we have to work on them. The ones that we don't want, the worst attributes, are the easiest ones, right? So like, to me, it's easy to be bitter. Like, that just comes natural. You have to cultivate being grateful, right? It's easy to not be disciplined. It's hard to be disciplined. It's easy to become arrogant. It's hard to be humble. It's easy to be a liar, right? It's hard to be about truth no matter what comes your way. It's easy to be fear-based. It's hard to be courageous, right? It's easy to be greedy. It's hard to be generous. Let's face it, right? That's why most people don't like tithing, right? Because it's hard, right? So the best attributes are always the hardest. But what's interesting about that is when you can't control your talent, you can always control your virtue. And if you don't want to die ordinary, having great virtues is a great way, or one of the great ways, to make sure that you're extraordinary. So I think building character is huge.
Something that you've made really clear throughout this is how important it is to kind of learn from those who've come before you or are successful in the field that you're in. And whether that's through reading the Bible, listening to podcasts, listening to advice from parents or friends, there's mentors along the way. And I'm curious for you, what's maybe a lesson that you've learned? What's a lesson you've learned from a mentor that has shaped who you are today?
Yeah, so I can go back to being 16 years old, and my manager at the time working at the call center, she said, Edwin, the more stress you can take on, the more pressure you can take on, the more money you're going to make. And that stuck to me. To this day, it stuck to me. And that's why I've always embraced pressure, and I've always embraced sort of stress. And again, one of the ways I've done it is by not running away from it. Most people hide, they try to escape from it. And I've always just hit it head on. And every win you get, you start building a little more confidence. You start building more of those muscles that'll sustain success for a long time.
What's your last guiding principle to the younger generation?
It all starts again with your dreams, right? I believe that you're born to do something great, and God places these dreams in your heart. And sometimes people think that God places these dreams in your heart so you can accomplish them. And I don't necessarily think that's the case. I think he puts them there to draw you closer to him because he knows that you probably can't do it on your own. And that's why sometimes it's so crippling to give up on your dreams, because when you don't go after your dreams and when you don't accomplish your dreams, there's this part of your life that won't get as close to your faith as you would have by going after your dreams and accomplishing them. So for me, again, big dreams, knowing that big dreams come with big challenges. And it's not supposed to be easy. Like, who told you it's supposed to be easy? If it's easy, it's not going to last very long. Everything worthwhile is always uphill. Everything easy is always downhill. I've always embraced hard things. To this day, I seek hard things. I just enjoy it. I love the challenge of it. I love competition. I love doing things that, most people think they can't do. And that's the challenge of it. I love it. I realized a long time ago that I'm a dead man without a challenge. I need to be challenged. I think you cease to live when you're not challenged. I think I feel the most alive when I'm challenged. And, so find out whatever that challenge is. Maybe if the challenge isn't financial anymore, then maybe figure out how much money you can give away, right? If the challenge isn't finance anymore, then how do you get closer to your faith if you haven't challenged yourself there? Maybe the challenge is you need to get better at your fitness. Maybe you're crushing your business, maybe you're crushing your family, but your fitness sucks. So challenge yourself there. There's always things that you can challenge yourself with. So I'm always constantly looking for ways to challenge, right? So, right now I'm in the middle of a challenge. We're having a down year. In 2024, we had a down year, and I'm rebuilding both companies as we speak. And then I'm dealing with a bunch of stuff in my family side, and I'm embracing it. I know this is just another challenge, and this is only going to make me stronger. And again, faith is, when you look at faith, right? We've been talking about a lot of faith, right? Faith is the projection of the most beautiful possible thing for the future. The opposite of that is fear. Fear is the projection of the worst possible thing for the future. If you really think about it, they both haven't happened yet. It's going to be your choice which one you choose. For me, 90% of winning has always been faith, right? It takes the same amount of mental energy to think about success as you do as failure. So for me, I'm going to lean on faith. I'm going to lean on success and the projection of the most beautiful possible thing for the future.
So we always like to end our podcast talking about legacy. And through interviewing thousands of entrepreneurs, millionaires, asking them how they built their companies and sharing that with the world, we like to hope to share that legacy with everybody out there. And so I wanted to ask you, what legacy do you want to leave behind, and how do you want to be remembered?
So, great question. I think our greatest legacy will probably be built on the people that we lead, not what we produce, right? Ourselves. So one of the things I want to do in my industry, which I said earlier, is I want to help create the most 6, 7, 8-figure a year earners that our industry has ever created. I want to be able to pay it forward. The reason I do what I do still today, and I haven't sold my company, is because I still love changing people's lives. I love saving people's lives, because the way my life was changed, again, I was this shy, timid kid that couldn't even speak, and now, I've been able to build a pretty successful company. I want to do that with my kids as well. Things aren't taught, they're caught. And I want to show them with my examples of what it is to be a man of character, because they're seeing it, right? I can talk about it all I want, but if they're seeing something different, that's not going to work. So I want to, I want to help them believe that they can do bigger things, and hopefully I could do that by being an example to them. And yeah, that's kind of the legacy. Is I want to build leaders. I want my kids to be leaders. I want them to have the same thing I had that my mom instilled in me, which was them knowing that God is always with them no matter what. And they lean on faith through good times and bad times, because bad times are going to come. And it's in those times where you don't run away from your faith, you lean on your faith.
Wow. Well, Edwin, this was amazing.
Yeah, thank you guys.
From start to finish, you gave some incredible advice for everybody tuned in. For the people that are tuning in, where can everybody find you at online, and with any of the companies or anything?
Yeah, so the probably the best part, the best place is Edwin Arroyave Official. I think that's what it is. We just changed it from Tedwinator, which is the last time you guys were here. My wife finally gave me clearance on changing it to Edwin Arroyave Official. So that's where you would find me.
Amazing. And any of your companies, you hiring for any of the businesses, or?
Yeah, so we're always hiring. So if you DM me, believe it or not, I still check those. Anytime I could give any knowledge, I do. So yeah, just feel free to DM me if you have any questions and stuff like that.
Amazing. Well, guys, everybody tuned in right now, be sure to like and subscribe for amazing content we've got coming with the most successful business owners and people all over the entire world. And if you're watching right now and are not a member of our private entrepreneur community, the School of Mentors, the #1 community for business owners in the entire world, along with all of Edwin's links to his company and his channels in the description, we've got the link to become a member of our private entrepreneur community, where every week you can get mentored from the multimillionaire and billionaire entrepreneurs that we interview on this channel. So go to the link down in the description to check that out, to become a member of the #1 community in the entire world for business owners. With that being said, we'll see you guys in the next episode.